Hey guys, Michael here. Want to talk to you about one of our sponsors in our never-ending quest to make Acquisitions Anonymous break even. And that sponsor is cloudbookkeeping.com. It's actually run by my neighbor, Charlie, who's a great guy. And he has been our longest tenured sponsor. And we're super grateful for him to support the podcast. So what Cloud Bookkeeping does, it is a set of cloud bookkeepers that if you're a small business person, help you get out of the business of doing your books and let you focus on the business of taking care of your customers. So they do all the complexities, bookkeeping, payroll, and they come across and are very client service first. That's their phrase, but I know that's true because I've spent time with Charlie and dug into their business. So full suite of accounting services, sophisticated reporting, QuickBooks software solutions, and full service payroll options. So definitely talk to Charlie if you want to get out of doing bookkeeping and outsource that to a trusted third party. And you can find them at cloudbookkeeping.com. So thanks again for sponsoring today, cloudbookkeeping.com.
Hey, I'm Michael Girdley. Welcome back to Acquisitions Anonymous. Special episode today. I am with Twitter rockstar Clint Fiore, who also lives here in South Texas. And he is a business broker. And since so much of our audience is business buyers and sometimes sellers, we've asked Clint to join us today. And I am going to hit him with a bunch of questions. So Clint, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Michael. Appreciate it.
Yeah, before we get started, love for you to just take like 1 minute, introduce yourself. I know you've bought and sold a lot of business. I know you sold your own business at one point. Tell us how you got into doing what you do today.
Yeah, so my name's Clint Fiore. I have a company called Texas Business Buyers. It's based in Kerrville, Texas, but we do deals all over the state. We're a regional business brokerage that kind of straddles between upper Main Street and lower middle market. I got into this business really started as a serial entrepreneur, classic shiny object chaser kind of guy. Helped raise angel investors, started up a couple businesses, sold a couple businesses, and started looking to buy a business that I could own myself after I had sold a couple and had a little money to work with, and was so frustrated with how hard it was to buy a business that I actually decided to get into this business to hopefully disrupt that and make it easier for other people. So kind of scratched my own itch. Wasn't impressed with a lot of the business brokers I met as a buyer and wanted to build the brokerage I wish existed when I was shopping. So that's how Texas Business Buyer started, and that was 7 years ago.
That's awesome. So kind of starting with the foundational stuff, what does a business broker do, and kind of how is that different than, say, an investment banker?
We're kind of like realtors, but you never see our signs on anything. We just work behind the scenes. We find good businesses that don't have a succession plan, and we help the owner kind of figure out what it's worth, develop a go-to-market strategy where we secretly market it. The employees don't know it's for sale. Usually nobody knows it's for sale except for business buyers that are looking in specific marketplaces for these opportunities. And we just let the owner kind of run the business as usual. And we build the marketing package, shop it. We get competition from a bunch of buyers, help select the right suitor, negotiate the deal, and then kind of walk it all the way through closing and transition and beyond. And it's just the value prop for owners is really the time savings from the hundreds of hours it takes to kind of work the deal, because they're usually busy people running the business. And then also they've never done it before, and we can create a competitive environment and kind of run a fair process and help level the playing field with the buyers of today, which are usually very sophisticated people that have done this many times.
Yeah. When I think I saw you tweet the average business that is represented by a broker when it sells for something like 15% more than businesses that are seller run processes. Did I have that right, or is there something else we need to know about that?
Yeah, that I forget who studied that. It was probably Deal Stats or like the Biz Buy Sell market reports. But it was looked at in terms of apples to apples. When you looked at the same EBITDA or the same discretionary earnings in the same industries, broker represented deals tended to get more money for the seller. And usually that was in excess of what a business broker costs to use. And so it's really advantageous. I think it helps sellers to just say, man, I can have a pro help handle this deal for me and still end up with probably more cash in my pocket and have a pro help me the whole way through. And so, yeah.
Great. And then, so where's the range that business brokers typically play in? And I know sometimes business brokers will choose specific industries to focus on as well. So kind of how does that segment, and how do business brokers tend to be segmented in the market of service providers?
I view it as if you looked at just the government and asked how many small businesses exist, you get numbers somewhere in around 30 million of them. But in my opinion, about 20 something million are unsellable. They're really just people that have LLCs that are self-employed. And we only have a sliver of the market that's I would say been in business 3 years, has more than 5 employees, and really has transferable earning stream that can go past the current ownership. And that's really where business brokers are looking. And some estimate that's between 5 to 10 million businesses in America that are kind of in that sellable category of small business. When I think of business broker, I'm typically thinking of under $5 million transactions, which is where I draw the line kind of between Main Street and middle market. At 5 million is typically when advisors in the space start calling themselves M&A advisors or investment bankers or other titles besides business broker, because business broker is typically equated more with a Main Street business. And so our shop kind of spans that. We do 1 to 10 million often, and so I'm not really offended if I get called a business broker or an M&A advisor, because we kind of do the low end of M&A and the high end of business broker.
Yeah, very cool. And then, so how does a business broker typically get paid? Like, if I'm a buyer, what should I know about how you're going to get paid as somebody representing a seller?
It's kind of like real estate in terms of there's a success fee at closing, and so our firm and most business brokers you meet, we work on an exclusive sell side engagement where sometimes we'll get a small upfront packaging fee or something to take a company to market. But typically most of our money is made at the closing table, and it comes out of the seller's proceeds on the sale. Once you get into the larger deal size and kind of the middle market, you get retainer situations much more often. And that's where you're kind of charged monthly amounts while they're working the deal that typically gets credited against the closing success fee. Whereas in Main Street, it's typically all or most or 90% or more of their fees are earned at the closing table at the transaction, like a realtor.
Yeah, makes total sense. And so your firm in particular, you're here in Central Texas where I am. Well, I guess they actually, when I say Central Texas, the people from Austin get really mad and tell me I'm from South Texas, but don't worry about that. You're from this part of Texas where I'm from. So it sounds like you've made the decision to be geographically focused as a broker. Is that more common than, say, people picking specific industries where they're going to say, okay, I'm only doing laundromats, for example, and I'm just going to specialize in that? Or how does that shake out in terms of the universe of brokers?
It's all over the place. We chose to be industry agnostic, mainly because, I built my business because it's a reflection of what I wanted out of it. And I wanted to be regional, mainly because I have a small plane and I wanted to fly around to meetings and not just be stuck in one city all the time. I'd probably make more money if I just stuck to one city, but I like the variety. To me, variety is the spice of life, and I love looking at different deals and different industries and different cities and meeting, new casts of characters every time. And we have a group that works our deals together, and we'll travel around for the right deal. But in the industry, I think you're starting to see more and more people are niching into specialties, and that I think it's got pros and cons to doing so, but they seem to, sellers really like that. If you're a laundromat owner and you talk to somebody and they're like, yeah, all I do is laundromats, I speak your language, that gives you kind of a warm fuzzy. But I don't think, I'm a little biased, but I don't think they could sell it better than a good generalist can that has done a few in that space. And so there's definitely pros and cons to each. Geographically though, you run into a tapestry of state laws, and you got to be kind of careful if you're trying to go national that you keep up with the appropriate licensing for each state, because it does vary state by state.
Yeah. Super interesting. So you guys are you are a licensed business broker in the state of Texas. It's kind of like the real estate agents are licensed.
Texas doesn't have a business broker license, but I am a real estate licensed person. So anytime you touch leases or selling real estate, and we do sell millions of dollars of real estate every year, but it's just generally along for the ride on a business deal. And so we have that license, but there's certain states where they do have business broker licenses, and there's certain states where they require you to have a real estate license, and some where they don't. And so it's definitely a mixture.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay. One of the things I see often is people running seller processes where, say, the CPA or the lawyer is running it, or the bookkeeper's running it, or that kind of thing, where you have this non-professional, non-broker person running your process for you. Like, how do you think about those? How does that affect me, like, as a buyer when I see something like that?
Well, I think that brokers do a better job, mainly because we can speak to both sides. And a big part of a broker's job is to really be an intermediary, where they're in the middle, kind of helping the buyer's request make sense to the seller, and helping the seller's fears make sense to the buyer, and kind of sharing both sides. And when you have a typical deal where you've got a seller that's never done this before, and they're bunkered up with an attorney, and the attorney is just very my side only, kind of standoffish, adversarial, it's hard when you get to a obstacle, which all deals do, as you know, come to many obstacles along the way, to not have a voice of reason. That's kind of that pragmatic, solutions oriented, protect the deal referee, kind of person that can have the respect and credibility with both sides. And that's why I think that buyers, part of what my crusade on Twitter is to help buyers like brokers more, because if you get a good broker in there, like, they're your best friend, and they can help get the deal done. And you just got to find the good ones that are deal makers, that close deals, and can get the seller off of high center when you need to, and really help you get it all the way.
Well, you touched there on a topic I really wanted to dig into. So thank you for going right into my preparation. But like, business brokers, at least in the business buying community, are really disliked. Like, and I know you're special, which is, thank you for being here, and is why you're here. But like, what are these typical brokers doing? And I'm interested from your perspective, being on the broker side, because I know what pisses me off about them. But what from your perspective are these business brokers doing wrong that causes them to be so hated?
Okay, so view it like anything else, the 80-20 rule.
And I know you don't do this. This is the stuff other people do. Yeah.
So it's like this, not just in business brokerage, but I think it's in real estate brokerage, commercial and residential, anything where there's brokers. 80% kind of suck, and 20% are really good, and they do most of the volume, and are true professionals in the space.
Yeah.
And I think what happens in business brokerage, and why it takes such a bad rap, is most people don't do tons of deals, and they might encounter just one business broker their whole life that's in that 80% of sucky, and then they brush off the whole industry as not helpful, don't know what they're doing, don't add value. And I'm here to say that it's not just my firm, but there are other good firms out there that do really good work in this space. And I think I could compare and contrast some of those main differences real quick. But to me, the main thing I see in the sucky side is more of like a real estate mentality that's being taught, an old school mentality taught among brokerages, which is it kind of, I think, goes back to residential real estate, which is just get as many listings as possible. It's all about listings. Some will sell, some won't. So what? But to me, that's a disservice to the sellers. It creates a very low success rate. I think industry wide, any listing you see on Biz Buy Sell that's broker represented, the odds of it actually selling is probably 20 to 30%. So it's very low sell through rate. And I think it's because they do it like realtors do it, which is you do a quick write up, you do the facts and figures, you put it up there, and you hope someone puts in an offer and buys it. But this isn't a house. Businesses aren't these static things that just sit there and hold their value. They're living, breathing, dynamic things, and they're people's babies, their heart and soul, and they require finesse to buy and finesse to sell, and dealing with egos and emotions and all these things. And so what I do and what good brokers do is they're more selective. They try to take on just quality deals that they can price right with motivated sellers, and give themselves the time bandwidth to really do the dance of the deal and walk it through all its twists and turns, solve all the problems needed, and get to closing. Because if you just hope that the LOI comes in and the attorneys work it out and it closes, most are going to die, and they're just not going to get done. And it takes hard work to kind of get it all the way through. And so my philosophy from the beginning has always been, I would rather take on 10 deals a year but close 9 or 10 of them than take on 50 and close 10 of them, because I don't want 40 pissed off people and all of the heartburn that goes with that, and this churn and burn type mentality. And so yeah, I think it's all about just kind of turning away the marginal stuff, taking on good stuff, and doing really good work for it. That separates probably the 80s from the 20s, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally dig it. Well, so similar kind of vein, but on the different side, you talk a lot on Twitter about how buyers, and there's a ton of social media search funders on Twitter and other places talking about their journey. You talk about a lot of the things that you see the successful ones there, or the smart ones there doing well. What sort of things would be, say, your top 3 that you would advise potential buyers of businesses that are approaching you or looking at the deals you're representing? Like, what should they do to set themselves apart and be more successful?
Well, I think you see a huge amount of, it's almost kind of, there's a flip side to this. So you know how among the buyer community, brokers can be this stereotype and this joke and kind of this clown world of an industry. Well, from the broker's perspective, we kind of have a stereotype of buyer, and it's kind of this nerdy MBA person that sends you an email every week that's the same template that says, I'm looking for $1 million EBITDA, and this, it's like the exact same thing every time, but they're trying to convince you, but they're special and different than all the others that have the exact same form letter. And it's just hard to differentiate yourself. And so, like anything, this is really a relationship game. I actually read a tweet today, I think it's from the strip mall guy or somebody, that said, often the brokers give the deal to the person that called them last. And that's kind of true. And it's just, the more you can have a relationship and show that not only am I serious and qualified, but I'm going to show well to your sellers. And so a broker, when we're bringing a buyer to a seller, what we don't want to do is embarrass ourselves as the broker, as a representative. And that first buyer we bring, we want it to be someone who we connect with personally, that we feel like is going to hit it off with the seller. And I think a big thing that buyers make a mistake on is thinking that it's all about the dollars and cents, when it's really about relationships. And so form great quality relationships with brokers. And when you go see the seller, don't try to impress them with yourself. Try to get them talking to tell their story and their life story, and talk about their employees and their families and what makes them tick, and kind of just do those classic, how to win friends and influence people things to win the hearts and minds of the sellers and the brokers. And that's going to get you so much further, and leave the bragging about yourself and your MBA and your resume and your stats. Show that to the bankers, because they love that, but bring your heart and relationship skills to the table with the sellers and the brokers. And that's going to go a long ways.
So it sounds like credible, likable, personable, persistent. Those are kind of the 4 things I heard from you that are appropriate, but not so persistent that you're sending a repeat form letter, the same thing every week to the people.
Yeah, I want to believe you have real money. So it's like, that's important too. Like, do you have money? Are you serious? Are you going to close the deal or jerk me around for 6 months? And so I want to either see a track record, or I want to see a real specific indicator that says my seller is going to like you, and you're going to get this deal closed without it dragging on, with minimal drama. And if you could kind of give me hints that indicate that, then you're going to be kind of first in line to the meetings and to making the offer and getting it under contract.
Yeah. Well, let's say back to the kind of do I have money or thing not, a lot of people are going out doing searches that are self-funded or they're search funders. So they don't have their LP capital completely put together. What sort of things can those people do to convince you that they're, a viable bidder enough to put you in front, for you to risk your reputation, put them in front of the seller?
Previously closed deals are a good indicator, and so I think there's a lot of middle market advisors that really look at references and want to see your portfolio and that you have a track record of doing this. And if you and that kind of gives you a big advantage. But for people that have not done a deal before, I would be a little bit quicker to show that, hey, I'm going to have some skin in the game here. Like just seeing once you get serious about something, seeing that I've got $500,000 in my 401k and $200,000 loose here, so I'm going to put some in here, but I've got these 3 people ready to invest with me, and we have a banker that's ready to do this thing, and then we're going to ask for 5 or 10% seller financing to bridge the gap, and you just kind of have your very clear indication of that. I'm going to put personal skin in the game. I have real people that that you can see their names and bios that are in this with me. And then we have a banker that's a real bank that knows how to do this in here with me. And you kind of got that capital stack figured out and aren't just coming to the table with an LOI where it just looks like you're crossing your fingers hoping that you get money afterwards. The more that you have up front lined up, the more credible you look to a broker.
Yeah, and I may have missed it, but one piece of advice, and you may have just said it, that we got yesterday from Heather when we talked to her from Live Oak Bank was, she encourages her search funders that work with her to go visit with her ahead of time. So, she can be up to speed on the deal. She can tell you, oh, this is never going to underwrite, so don't waste the seller's time. That sort of thing. And maybe that is, and I think I heard you say that, but that's so powerful. I think if you could go into a meeting and just be like, okay, I've talked to an SBA banker, they do more than anybody. This is them. And here's my underwriting, with them. And they've told me preliminary, they like the way it looks and they're going to push it through the process. Yeah, super interesting. Yeah, and then secondarily, like the process of demonstrating credibility to sellers is always so interesting. Often because they look at the wrong stuff, right? I see people that have closed a lot of deals, but I know they don't have the money for the deal. It's like, and they'll care more about that than they will say about somebody who has all the cash in the bank, which is very, very interesting to me from a social dynamics kind of standpoint. So,
when the buyer and the seller like each other, and there's this kind of magic that happens when the buyer and seller kind of fall in love and like each other and they want to do the deal and they trust each other. I feel like if I've got that as the broker, I can get anything else done. Like money, we'll figure it out. Everything else works out. And so there's just that huge aspect that's the likability and rapport building and getting in there and forging that relationship. And that relationship will carry you through all the twists and turns and the several times the deal tries to die on the table before it gets done. Relationships are king.
Yeah, totally dig it. So what are some of the reasons you would turn down a listing? So you talked about some of them are just jobs, right? They're LLCs where somebody has a job, so the business can't exist without the seller. What are other reasons you would turn down a listing?
A lot of times it's because it's a business that I think is too wrapped around the owner. And so I kind of try to put myself in the shoes of the buyer. And, I think a lot of times brokers, CPAs, and other advisors, they just look at the EBITDA, right? And they say, okay, this has $1 million in EBITDA and we think it's worth 4X, 5X, whatever. And that's that. And it's this simplistic rear view mirror look based on the financials. But if I'm a buyer, that's like a conversation starting point about, do I want this deal? Is it big enough? What do I think it's worth? But ultimately as a buyer, you have to ask yourself, well, what's my EBITDA going to be? And is that different than what it's been historically for the seller? And so when I am early on in the process as a broker, and I realize that this seller, for instance, they may be an industry leader that goes to the same trade show every year for the past 30 years, and everybody knows them, everybody calls their cell phone. They're either the main rainmaker for the business, or they serve some critical function where you can't bid on work without talking to them. Or and it's just like they've amassed decades of personal goodwill from their experience and all that. Like, and you come in and they go out the door in 60 days, are you going to make that same EBITDA? Like, I don't think you will in that scenario. And so the ones I like to see are they I'm kind of looking at it as if this guy gets hit by a bus, right? The bus test, is this earning stream still going to be intact? And so we definitely look at that. And once we kind of know that there's a good transferable earning stream that's not too wrapped around the owner, that we think a buyer can step into and realize the same types of earnings, then can we convince the seller what a reasonable expectation is on valuation? And so that's another big reason we turn people away, is if we look at it every which way, pencil it out the way Heather and a banker is going to look at it, because we know what their parameters are. We know that the ROI buyers are looking for, and what else is on the market that people could shop for and buy. And if we look at it every which way and we think it's a $3 million deal, and the owner just says, no, I need 5. My financial advisor says I need 5 for this to work. Well, I say, well, I can get you 3. I can't get you 5. If you need 5, you need to get to this level of EBITDA or this, and come back to me when it's worth 5, and I'll get you 5. And that's where a lot of them go away, and they'll come back 2 years later, and maybe they'll have it at 5, or maybe they'll have just realized that I need to get my 3 because that's all I'm ever going to get it to. And then we sell it. And I think that the 80% brokers that kind of give the industry a bad name, when they get in that scenario, they want the listing so bad that they might be like, well, you know what? I think it's worth 3, but we can ask 5 and see what happens. And they'll let the market beat them up and offer 3, but they know it's worth 3. And I just can't in good conscience do that. Like, I tell the seller what I can get them. I tell them what I think the market will bear. We try to price it right, nail it, and get it. And I'd say the majority of people that go away and don't list with us is because we can't come to see eye to eye on the valuation. And so that's probably the main thing we do as a broker that's so valuable to buyers too. When you're thinking on your side, Michael, is we've kind of had that fight for you of bursting the value bubble of the seller. And then when you find brokers that do a good job at that, you can get a deal that's priced right out of the gate, and it's a lot easier to get done than you coming in as a buyer and trying to pop that bubble and still get the seller to like you and want to work with you for a year, and all those things. That's a tough ask for a buyer,
If you're a seller, the last person they're going to believe telling the seller is the last person they're going to believe telling them that their business is priced too high is the buyer. Like, that just doesn't happen. So that's why I'm kind of like I'm on one side, I've done mostly non-brokered acquisitions, and I like those for the obvious reason. It's a less efficient market when there's no broker involved, and it's easier for the other side to do a deal more in the buyer's favor. On the other side, I'm really psyched when I see a banker, because I know that the banker or the broker is going to talk people through not doing stupid stuff, right? And so that's why I'm kind of mindful of it being a two-edged sword. I'm also curious, is it ever the case that when people are selling, like, say you find a business that's being marketed, but it's not represented by a broker, do you ever get brought in like mid-process where the buyer's like, given your level of sophistication, I think you need some help. Here's a couple names, like, call these people and consider working with them? Or by that point, are those typically the buyers that are just too smart to work with brokers and it wouldn't possibly do that?
I would say it's happened with sellers more often than buyers. Is they'll be trying to DIY it and bring in their CPA or attorney. When a seller's bringing a company to market or thinking about selling, there's kind of a stack of people they trust the most, and the CPA is at the top of that pile, and the attorney is number 2. And the CPA is usually the first person they tell I'm thinking about selling. And so it's CPA, attorney 2, wealth manager 3 that are the top 3 people they're going to talk to. And sometimes they'll try to get it done with them. And a CPA or attorney sometimes will think, okay, yeah, I'm happy to help you with this. And a good business owner always has buyers reaching out to them directly. And so they think they don't need a broker because brokers in their mind are only good for finding a buyer, right? And so they'll get a buyer on the hook. They'll tell their CPA or attorney about it, and they'll start trying to work on a deal, and they'll quickly find they're kind of outwitted, outmatched by a sophisticated buyer group, and they're asking questions and things that they don't know how to handle. And at that point, sometimes those smart advisors around them that have the seller's trust, the CPA or the attorney, will say, we need to bring a deal person in this, and that can help get this done. And so I have gone in midstream on deals where a buyer and seller are already on the hook, where the seller just needs somebody on their side. A few times I've gotten brought in by buyers, and that's typically when it's an unrepresented deal and it's a first-time buyer, and they just want to know, the main thing that buyer wants to know is this a fair deal? Because they'll have, the seller wants $5 million, but they don't want to feel like an idiot for overpaying. And so they'll bring in, somebody like us to mainly give an opinion on value and deal structure. And that's really more of a limited engagement, just to kind of consult and say, yeah, I think if I were representing that seller, I think I could get them $5 million. And if you paid that, I don't think you're out of your mind. Or if I look at it and say, no, there's no way I could get them more than $3 million. They're smoking crack if they want $5 million. So, I'd only be comfortable in your shoes getting to $3 million. And then from there, I'd probably be out. And just having someone who's a deal person in the industry that has reps in doing that is sometimes valuable for a buyer.
Yeah, totally dig it. So what percentage of the deals you're working on end up being SBA loans? Is that more than half, a third?
About half.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's about half the time.
Super cool. Okay. All right. So wanted to kind of get into market dynamics and just talk a little bit about like near-term trends you're seeing, because I think that could be very helpful for folks thinking about their own search or their own purchase and where they might go find deals that are a good fit for them. So, what kind of trends are you seeing with regards to these Main Street businesses? I got to imagine there are certain segments that are super duper hot right now that everybody wants to own, and there's some that are getting ignored. Is there any stuff like that going on that you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, overall, what I'm probably most excited about is that small businesses are probably the last remaining major multi-trillion-dollar asset class that's not a huge valuation bubble, in my opinion. The multiples stay pretty steady decade after decade through the ups and downs in all the markets. I would say middle market, you get some crazier swings in valuations as there's roll-ups happening and different dynamics happening. But the mom and pop Main Street business, I'm talking about probably the $1 to $5 million deal, like they're still at normal valuations. And there is the hot sectors that doesn't typically swing the values more than 10, 20%. It doesn't make it 3 times more valuable because SBA, they're still limited. Like they still have to get appraised and get the right debt coverage ratios and pencil out right. And so when you're under 5 million, where SBA is king of finance, it kind of limits your upper band of what you can expect buyers to be able to pay for the business. And it kind of prevents wild swings in prices. But where there's hot sectors, the deals just tend to sell faster with more people bidding on them, but they don't typically sell for eye-watering crazy values. And so hot sectors right now are car washes, self-storages, anything where people with a lot of money that are middle-aged and don't feel like they want to have 30 employees but could still make good money. Like those are really hot. And so that's why people think about laundromats, car washes, things like that. There's huge amounts of opportunities or competition there. And I think the sweet spot right now for buyers is for ones that are willing to take on HVAC, plumbing, pest control, ones where the multiples are low, demand is huge for on the consumer side for home services businesses. And if you can buy an established one in that space, you don't have as much buyer competition. You can probably get a better deal, and just kind of have an evergreen necessity business that is going to be just a cash cow for many years to come. And it's just a matter of keeping the clients happy, keeping the employees happy, keeping the techs, there and working hard. There's lots of great opportunities in home services right now.
Yeah. Well, and how often are you seeing your buyers are buying themselves a job? And that's top of mind for me because my goal is not to have a job. But maybe that's my job, not having a job. Anyway, like what percentage of folks, say in home services or whatever, like is part of their strategy that they're going to be a great manager and they're going to be in there driving a pest control truck, to make sure their staff believes in them. And then how many are trying to be passive owners with staff installed that can run the business just as well or better than they can?
It's a mixture. For first-time buyers, I generally recommend you get in there and run it and learn every job and every position just to earn everyone's respect, see where the inefficiencies are, and learn. It's hard to lead people to do things you haven't done before. But I'm seeing in home services, I'm seeing these kind of holding companies or mini private equity groups that if they already have that experience where they know where they've been a plumber or they've got somebody that's a leader for their division that's got good credibility in this space, where they'll buy a bunch of plumbing companies and do a little miniature regional roll up, if you will, and just leverage that existing experience and credibility to buy a bunch. And that's one of the trends I'm seeing in Main Street is, everybody's been talking about how there's this demographic wave of baby boomer owners and there's not enough buyers to buy out all the baby boomers. Well, the way that's getting solved is there's a new class or category of buyer, and that's kind of a serial buyer, and they're buying more than one of these companies from boomers and bolting them together. And that's a mega trend that I'm really interested in. I love those repeat buyers, and I love kind of learning how they do it and how they tick. And it's one of the most fascinating parts of brokerage right now is meeting those characters that are doing kind of mini private equity holdcos or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I see those with different structures, right? You have people doing them deal by deal where, they're just a solo GP who's, putting these together. Then you see folks who are doing this an opco holdco model, right? Like a mini baby Berkshire, like Xavier's business, Enduring Ventures. So yeah, I'm curious to see how those kind of formats shake out because there's pluses and minuses, I think, with both of them. So yeah, no, that's a cool trend for sure. One thing Heather said yesterday, which was really interesting, from Live Oak Bank, was that she talked about how, she encouraged, I asked her the same question, like, where should buyers be looking for reasonable deals or good deals? And she said, avoid where institutional capital is coming into Main Street. So like private equity firms coming down, rolling up dentist office, folks like Xavier, who's, a very good operator, coming in and buying up HVAC companies or pool construction, for example. Those are things where she's like, figure out something they're not buying and go after those kind of industries. So I don't know, your thoughts on that particular point? Agree, disagree?
No, that's great advice. Or just go after a deal size that's right under the threshold that they're looking for, that institutional money would buy. And so it used to be, all the institutions want $1 million in EBITDA. Now they're starting to look a little lower, but there was a play that I really liked for years of buying that one doing 600 to 900 in EBITDA and then growing it to $1 million in EBITDA. And I would call that the level up strategy, where you can get a much higher multiple selling it upstream to a institutional buyer by buying something that's just under their threshold or under their radar. So I think that play is still valid. But in today's world, you may have institutions buying the $500,000 EBITDA, and you may want to look at the 300 to 500 area in certain industries like HVAC. Is you do have institutions starting to buy the 600, 700, 800 EBITDA HVAC companies, for example.
Yeah, totally dig it. Yeah, I had a buddy who made his money really well rolling up a certain type of like therapy clinics, and took those and He'd put together a chain of 8 or 10 and then sell them to private equity once they got to a certain size and do that over and over again. It seems like, that kind of multiple arbitrage is an opportunity for people for sure. Yeah, right on. Cool. So what, one of the things we've talked about is, and I've seen you talk about it on Twitter, is that real estate values have gone up enormously, right? And with that, rent has gone up. And that's created a situation where a lot of businesses just exist because they own real estate where the cost basis is 1972, right? So instead of paying they're paying themselves 1972 rent, which would say it's $5,000 a month, whereas that same piece of real estate on the open market would be $150,000 or $200,000 a month. Like, how often is that happening when you're seeing these businesses that are basically not profitable? They're zombies, but they're only propped up because they bought real estate really cheaply. And how is that kind of affecting the market at this point?
So that's happening very often now, especially an owner occupied that's been there for a long time. Is the real estate's become so valuable that it's hard to determine if this can even be sold as an intact business if they still want to get what the real estate's worth in the eyes of a commercial realtor. And I just want to give probably an example here. Let me think of one. So I've got one right now. I just got engaged. It's not on the market yet. It's in the Houston area. It's a tree farm. And the seller's father started it. He's since passed away. And it's a beautiful tree farm, but it's surrounded by concrete and urban jungle now. And it's this like 20-acre oasis of green surrounded by city, on the outskirts of Houston. And the P&L of this business looks like any other small business. You've got, I think, $1 million-ish top line and 150, 200,000 of SDE, but you've got a couple $1 million of trees sitting there, and the real estate appraisal came in at $3.5 million. And when you think about like, holy crap, there's $6 million of inventory and real estate and equipment and assets, and you've only got 150,000 of cash flow. Like, that sucks on an ROI standpoint, right? And it's just, what do? It's like, do you kill dad's tree farm, and which has still a great reputation, great product, in order to bulldoze it and make more concrete and turn it into something else, or do you try to sell it together, and find a solution? And so we're probably doing a multi-phase strategy where we want to get somebody in there to buy the inventory and the tree farm as an operating business, but with a sweetheart lease for a limited amount of time that gives the operating person enough time to either sell off the inventory and relocate so that you can kind of keep the goodwill and keep that business going, but knowing eventually this is going to have to be redeveloped if these sellers want top dollar for this space. It can't be a tree farm. It has to be something else. And so we see that all over the place, not just on the sprawling businesses. Like, we see that with junkyards, or anything that's nursery, agriculture, salvage yards, equipment rental companies, things like that, where they've bought something right on the interstate on I-10 here by us, Michael, or and they've got acreage that was needed for it. Well, that acreage is now worth a whole lot more as a car dealership than it is an equipment rental yard. And so that's just a matter of a good broker has to come in there and figure out how can we get them something for this goodwill, keep these employees in jobs if we can, and get some value there, and then not screw over the ability for the seller to get what the real estate's worth down the road. So we'll deal with that quite often.
Yeah, I love it. Sounds super smart. So one tactical thing I want to loop back to, and then I know we're running out of time. This idea of, I'm a buyer and I want to develop a relationship with you, the business broker. Like, you talked a bit about how important that is. Tell me how to do that. Like, how do I do that in a way that isn't me sending you the same drip campaign from my automated email system every week that you delete?
Well, for me and others that are high performing, kind of the 20% folks, it's usually hard for us, and this is kind of a predicament. Is um, every day I could fill up my entire day with just really nice buyers that I really click with and really like, that just want to have a coffee and talk about their search, and but I've got deals I'm working, and it's hard to develop the time bandwidth to build those relationships. And so I actually have a team. So I've got a guy that works with me named Michael Ryder, um, and he's what I would call inside sales for our company. And he's typically nurturing those buyer relationships and seller relationships, the ones that went away that wanted 5 million and want to come back later and sell. He kind of makes sure that all those relationship nurturing is happening and has a lot of those conversations. And so look for brokers when you look at their website. That everybody has this tendency. You always want to kind of look for the top guy, and that's how we're wired. Is if you've ever done B2B sales, right? Like you want to get the CEO or you want to get whoever the decision maker is, but a lot of times they're hard to reach and they don't have the time to just sit down and unpack things. But in our case, looking to the headquarters staff that's in there nurturing relationships and the ops team, and making sure that you have their ear early, because they're often the first line when a deal goes on the market and 100 buyers come in that first wave. They're not talking to me. They're usually talking to Michael Ryder, who's just a stud at maintaining quantity of relationships and figuring out who's the serious ones and who's the not serious ones. And so the best thing you could do in my firm is make a good impression on Michael, or make a good impression on Alyssa or others that are kind of our front line of defense. And besides that, just try to show up at our the drip campaign emails don't we get tons of them and they don't really do anything for us. And so show up at our events when we have events, and come around us socially, get to know us, um, and build relationships the old fashioned way as much as possible in your industry niche or in your geographical niche. Find who the players are, and you want to be that buyer that just appears to be serious, ready to go, going to be low drama, easy to work with, and that's going to help you kind of be front of the line.
Well, super cool. Thanks so much for doing this. This was really good. And like, I'm a serial buyer and I learned some cool stuff. So thanks for making me better today. How can people that are our listeners follow along? How can they support you? What would be the best way we can do that? I know you're very active on Twitter and I know you're working on some new projects.
Yeah. On Twitter, it's at Clint Fiore, CLINT FIORE. I am starting a newsletter that I'm going to help source deals around the country for folks that are looking for off-market or pre-market deals from quality brokers or directly from sellers. And so that's a brand new project called Probably a Good Deal. If you want to just go there directly, probablyagooddeal.com is that website. If you're in Texas and looking to either buy or sell a business, and you want our help from our team on either side of that, Texas Business Buyers is our company. Just go to texasbusinessbuyers.com. Give us a call, shoot us an email, and we'd be happy to help you out.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Michael. Appreciate it.